Decisions, decisions. Well, sightseers, you'll just have to wait till later in the video to find out, did I take road number A or road B? Door number 1 or door number 2? You remember that old show, don't you? That game show? Anyways, we've got choices here to make, and you'll just have to wait and see which one I chose. Hey sightseers, Sightseeing Sally here. I'm with Marty. He's coming down the road. You can see him in the distance there. And today we're checking out the remnants of an old mining town in Utah, known as Frisco. At one time there was 6,000 people living here. This would have been back during the old boom days of the silver mining and gold mining. Thus, everything that's here is pretty spread out. We're going to do our best to show you around Frisco so you can see what's left of this old town. Let's find out what meandering Marty's got. Looks like he found something interesting. What is it?
Piece of purple glass. Must have went through a fire or something.
Why do you say that?
Well, it doesn't look like it was in the shape of anything. It looks like it was melted or something.
If you pay close attention as you're walking through, besides trying to avoid stepping on sheep dung, you'll find that there are quite a bit of old artifacts just laying out here, like this glass and porcelain. I think this is porcelain. Yeah, that could have been from a plate or a cup maybe. Look, here's a pretty big chunk, thick chunk of brown glass. And it looks like it was maybe from a bottle. Not sure of the type. And then you've got another thick piece here. Maybe it was a part of this. Maybe not. Now, as we're making our way over closer to those ruins, I would just want to point out something that Marty had spotted earlier. And that is an old gas tank that's laying there, rusting in the desert sun. Well, this is entirely unexpected. According to my research, there shouldn't be any water out here. Or at least, there wasn't any back in the day when the town site was built here. In fact, when people lived out here, they had to truck water in. Oh look, we're coming up on one of those. I'm sorry, my hat is shading it. A piece of cowboy firewood. There's another one right up here. There you go. That's what the cowboys used to start fires out here in the desert. And the benefit to that, you can always be assured you'd have a fire because there was never a shortage of buffalo chips or cow chips even. Now here's an interesting relic just sitting here on the desert floor. An old piece of iron piping. It's like the corner piece is heavy. Yes, I know it has some dirt caked up in it, but it does feel pretty heavy. There are some larger pieces of old machinery out here. We'll get to them shortly. First, however, I want to show you this. These stone ruins and foundations of some of the old buildings from Frisco. This one here, Mother Nature has had its way, toppling down all the stones. It's just the very bottom foundation. And then you've got this one over here. Not really sure if this is more of the commercial district or where people lived, but based on this one, I'm thinking more of a commercial area in town. As I said, there was once 6,000 people living here. This, by the way, was one of, if not the, wildest town in the West. It had over 23 saloons, gambling dens, and then, of course, the old brothels that lined the streets, its commercial district, with those ladies of the night. Tempting. Probably not too hard, though. Tempting those miners with illegal activities. In fact, Frisco was so wild, it is said that 50 people per day lost their lives in barroom brawls and other gunslinging activities. It was so wild and crazy here that its seedy reputation surpassed all other cities. It was described as being a cross between Dodge City, Tombstone, and the biblical cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. I could go on, but I think you get the picture. This place was not a good place to be raising a family by any means. Right here, you can see the remains of another foundation. This looks like this here was the building itself, because if you look, you got rocks that have been tumbled down here, but then you've got the remains of a wall here. And then right next door is another here. So I'm thinking that this was a series of buildings here in town, likely commercial buildings. For all I know, I could be standing in the very spot where one of those infamous barroom brawls took place, or maybe even in one of those brothels where... Okay, we'll just leave it at that. Moving on. Over here are the ruins of probably one of the more interesting buildings in town. You can see at one time it was made of these rather large stones here. They kind of have a purplish pinkish hue, and they remind me of the rhyolite that we saw. Oh, I think that was in Oregon Pipe, where we saw rhyolite by one of the old stone cabins. And if I remember correctly, when we were down in Missouri exploring some of those old mills, there was one river in particular where you could walk out onto rhyolite. It was part of the geological formation of the stream bed, where it was a bunch of rhyolite just sitting there. You could walk on it. Anyways, the other interesting feature of this building is right there. It kind of looks like a stone closet. It does have wood on it. It's got the wood frame, and then it's got the wood up above. And it actually has like a little opening there. And if you look inside, you'll see that it was framed out in wood, and then it had like a metal liner added over it. Maybe this was some sort of cold storage unit. I don't know. You tell me.
Buffalo chip.
Here you can see a foundation that had been laid in at some point. Perhaps it was like an outdoor curbing. Maybe not. And then you can see the desert is slowly taking over, growing plants and brush and other, desert flora, fauna. Down over here, you've got this opening that kind of just looks like it was built in to go underground. And then oddly, you've got this pipe, this 90-degree pipe sticking up out of the ground. And then there's this here. Looking at it from the top, you can see it's separated into two sections. And it looks like it's made out of some sort of conglomerate, of stones and like an early form of concrete. I'm just puzzled over what that possibly could have been. And then there's more of that purple stone. It looks like it's been cut specifically. It's just that over time, Mother Nature, it's just kind of cracked and crumbled. But to me, it looks like it had been cut specifically and were large stones put in place as part of the building. Unfortunately, in the research that I did, I wasn't able to find like a town map or a town site map showing what it used to look like or where any of the buildings were compared to what is here today. Let's move on. There's some other things I want to show you, including something that's actually on the National Register of Historic Places. Yep, there is something out here that has made that distinguished list. While I wait for Marty to join me, I just want to point out a few more things. There are the ruins where we're just at. There's a road that cuts through here. And then here are a few more old foundations that are laying here, including one back over there. The elements have definitely taken their toll on Frisco. Well, I can see Marty's catched up to me. You can see he's standing over by an old piece of machinery that's been left behind. Let's go talk to him and find out exactly what it is.
This is some type of old sifter here, I believe. That big wheel here would turn, or the geared wheel here would turn. When these were hooked up, it would move like these ladder looking things left to right. And it must have ground down whatever they were running through it. And I assume from looking at it, it sat on top of this piece here. And it went down and got flushed through this. It was probably part of the processing, probably part of, you know, the extraction of whatever mineral they were after, gold, silver, whatever it was here.
From what I understand, from what I read on it, silver was the main ore that they extracted here, although I believe they may have also extracted some gold, maybe copper, zinc, I don't know.
Well, it's definitely for extracting something, so, I mean, them are obviously for either grinding down something or like moving it through a screen, you know, to smaller pieces so they could process it.
We're going to make our way over to another piece of equipment. As we are going through, though, I want to point out a few things that you can see just laying here on the ground. You've got the old piping that they probably put water through. Now, I think I mentioned this earlier. They had to truck water in here. There was no natural source of water here in Frisco back when the town was alive and thriving. It looks like Marty also has discovered something of interest. Let's go over there and see what it is. I know we're going a little off tangent here, but sometimes you got to do that when you're out here. Well, Marty, what did you discover over here?
An old conveyor. Used to have wheels like this on both sides, and then the belt would lay across here. I mean, when these seize up like this one, the belt ran across this so long that it wore through this 1/4 inch thick steel and wore a hole right through it, and that was seized up. It's a lot of miles to do that with a cloth belt or a rubber belt.
Moving along, you can see up over here by where Marty is standing, remnants of an old building. That would be this metal here. And then what he believes is remnants from an old blower housing that would have, you know, ventilated the mine.
See that discolored hill? You don't know what they were using to process. That I believe is tailings from mining, and you don't know what they were using to process it, but I know in some processing they use cyanide. Well, the thing about cyanide is you don't really get to tell anybody when you get exposed to it. I used to work with it, and the one thing they said about cyanide is if you taste almonds, you're dead.
Now that's a pretty grim thought, but as Marty indicated, when you're tasting almonds, it's too late. And then up where Marty is standing, we have an old boiler.
Apparently at one time they must have used this to, I assume, heat up water, turn a steam engine to turn a generator to power stuff. Whatever they did here, the burner must have been on this end because the blower's over here. They might have sprayed fuel oil through it, and that's what they used for heating it up. You can see the old gauge that used to be up here too, the old pressure gauge. Fortunately, somebody shot a hole in it, but you don't see gauges ain't that big anymore. That's pretty big. This might have been the solenoid valve that let the fuel oil through to spray in it. But it's kind of neat old stuff here.
Right up your alley.
Yep. A little bit of duct tape and a welder and it'd be working again. And the third deadliest thing in the desert you got to watch out for is that's asbestos. I can see the fibers in it. This refractory rock might be so old that there's nothing in it. But you can see that whatever they were sealing it with is kind of like a compressed fiberglass, but that's asbestos. I'm positive of that.
There you go, sightseers. You got 2 lessons today. One on cyanide and one on asbestos. While Marty heads back down to the truck to rest himself, I'm going to move on. Up over yonder is where we'll find that historic point of interest that's on the National Register of Historic Places, which I'm going to head to in a moment. First, I want to check something else out that caught my eye. And that's the thing when you're out here and you're looking around, you know, you're kind of going off of the things that your eye catches, and there are a lot of things that go unseen because You don't necessarily catch it unless you catch a glint off the sun. Or in my case, you catch movement on the corner of your eye from a little chipmunk that's running around behind a bush, which then leads you to look up, and then you see some rock formation over there that looks interesting, which is where I'm headed to next. Another buffalo chip. No sight of that chipmunk that I had seen. I think it ran off when it saw me coming, or heard me coming. Well, that is what I had seen from down below. That looks man-made. That definitely does not look like it was a force of nature that put that there. I'm going to try climbing up around this way because I think it'll put me at a point where I'll have a better view of the landscape. I'm seeing some things off in the distance that look interesting. Well, here we are, and immediately I get distracted by the bird in the tree. I'm pretty sure I saw a bluebird flying off. But beyond that, you can see the town site where we're just at, where the ruins are. And then, oh look, down over there, that was a spot I was going to show you, but I got so excited because we saw all them hulking pieces of equipment down over there that I blew right past it. And then, of course, you've got the grandeur of the mountains in the background. Beautiful scenery up here. Over there, alongside that mountain, you can see where they were doing some of the mining. And then, back over here, off in the distance, you can see where that historical point of interest is that we're going to head to next. And then, you've got this. What I came up here to see, what I thought might be so super interesting, turns out it's just a pile of tailings. Wah, 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 wah. Well, that's okay. The exercise was worth it, and so was the view. Man, that is such a beautiful view out there. Let's move on. I'm seeing a lot of them red, fiery red ants that I don't want to hang out here too long. We're going to move over to those kilns next. Now, I know some of you are probably wondering what happened to Frisco. And the answer is that back when they were mining, they weren't doing like kind of more the traditional mines where, you know, you bore your way into a mountain. They were doing more like an open pit type concept, and not quite like the open pits of today where they do the concentric, I think that's correct, the circles around like a football stadium. No, this was more, I want to say kind of a, if I'm understanding correctly, it was more like a funnel shaped, and I don't know for sure if the funnel was inverted so that it was wider. I'm assuming it got wider as you got closer to the bottom. But in any case, it was like this open pit concept, and the mine ended up, the one that they were digging in, ended up collapsing in on itself. When that mine collapsed, that kind of just put a to all the mining that was being done out here. Now, probably at that point, they had extracted, if I recall correctly, $60 million worth of ore. And given that at that point in time, many of the people associated with mining were opportunists, they just left. They didn't stick around, they just packed up their things and headed out of town. The Mormons also tried establishing a ward here. I don't know exactly where that fits in the timeline. I just know that I had read that they had tried to put in a ward. And if you don't know anything about Mormon religion, that's okay. Neither do I. In any case, the town did not survive. I suspect not having a source of water out here also played a factor in it, because again, as I said, they had a truck in the water. There wasn't a natural spring, even though we saw evidence of something like that here. It's possible that for whatever reason they weren't able to access that spring back then, or maybe that's just a spot where moisture collects these days. I'm going to stop here for a second to catch my breath and to point out that over here out of the side of the hill you can see a rather interesting structure. It appears to be made out of wood. Yep, definitely wood. And then you can see there are two openings that from here appear to go in rather far. My parents didn't raise no dummy. I am not going to stick my hand in there, nor am I going to stick my face up close to it. Besides, we are now at the point where I can show you the beehive kilns that are here that are on the National Register of Historic Places. You can see there are 4 of them, 2 of which the tops have deteriorated over time. Personally, I've only seen 2 other examples of beehive kilns still standing, and that would be 1 in Death Valley and 2 up in northern Michigan, in upper Michigan, the upper peninsula of Michigan, over at that ghost town of Fayette. For those who don't know, the beehive kilns would have been used to create charcoal or creosote, which were then used in the mining process as a fuel source, so that they could heat up whatever they needed to heat up during the processing of the ore. At least, that's what I think. It's been a while since I last studied up on the use of a beehive kiln. They do have these fenced off. I know the fence here is laying on the ground, but I'm not going to walk over it and go in because obviously they don't want people tramping in there, most likely because they've got the 2 that are already deteriorated, and then, you know, you've got the old vandals that like to hasten that along. I'll pop up on the screen an example from when we were in Death Valley. That way you can see what the inside of a beehive kiln looks like. Or, when you're done watching this video, you can go check out the video that I did in Death Valley. If I remember, I will link it down below. You can see if you go up towards the beehive kilns from the left instead of the direction that I came from, which was over there, that there's this crumbling down structure. This appears to be something that was probably more related to the refining of whatever it was that they were mining here, because if you look, you can see some metal here that was likely used in that process, along with a wooden ledge up there that whatever was there is no longer existing. There's actually some metal rods that are sticking up on the ground that have like that, almost like the head of a screw where you would screw something onto the top of that, and it's all lined up going in this direction here. Given my limited knowledge on all things mechanical, I'm just going to leave it at that and move on, because there is a cemetery here we want to check out. Plus, yep, there's a plus. We may even be able to see some of the old miner shacks closer to the mine. Just in this little spot here, you can see some interesting pieces of glass. You've got a yellow piece right here. You've got this nice chunk of purple. And it's kind of an interesting shape. Might have been like a bottle or something, but not your typical like beer bottle like these, or the necks from what looks like beer bottles, or you know, the old jugs that they had. This is obviously the bottom to one of them bottles, and then got the green glass and another bottom. There's some clear over here too. Now if I can only just find my way back down to where the truck is without having to walk 300 miles. But I think my best bet is to stay on the road, because trying to pick my way through the underbrush, more likely to come across critters that I don't want to come across. And here on the road, at least, you have a fighting chance of seeing them before they see you. This, by the way, is that building that I pointed out from up there when I said I got so excited over the hulking pieces of machinery over there that I forgot to film it, but you can see that this has like, I want to say almost like concrete reinforced walls, and then it just had this roof over the top. I have no idea what it was used for. I just thought it was an interesting structure out here in Frisco. And then over here is just a foundation that is just dug into the ground, and obviously the top part of the building is gone. Now, I had communicated with Marty. We've got these to keep in touch, and he found the remains of an old vehicle out in the desert. So I'm going to head over the next, and then I think we're going to head to the cemetery.
There's a couple old cars here. You can see the old bucket where you'd sit in, the old sideboard with the fenders on it yet. There's a few cars here because there's too many fenders laying around for one vehicle. And behind you, Sally, looks like another bucket that's just all bent up where people would sit. Kind of like this one where they'd sit. Come around here. The spring's still in here where you used to sit. What's left of it. Not many springs left, but that's where you used to sit.
Not nearly intact as I thought it would be.
No, this ain't no fixer-upper, let me tell you that.
You need a lot more pieces.
A lot of love.
Than what's here in order to fix her up.
More love than a mother can give an ugly baby.
Wah, wah. Gotta love Marty. As promised, the cemetery. Now, the thing that I find most interesting about this cemetery is that despite the town having 6,000 people and all the supposed loss of life that occurred from all those barroom brawls and other nefarious dealings that were going on, is that when you walk around the cemetery, you don't see all that many marked graves. However, given the fact that time has passed, a lot of time has passed, it's possible that some of the graves that were marked no longer appear to be marked because the headstones deteriorated. Maybe they were wooden stakes, you know. And then the fact that if they were burying people like, you know, Black Bart or whoever else, they probably weren't marking those graves. They may have just been piling them up. This first one you can see is clearly defined with a wooden cross. Somebody left behind cowboy boots that are starting to deteriorate in the sun. And then obviously you can see that the ground is mounded up. And then next door to that is another one with a cross and then the ever telltale sign of the mounding of the ground. There are some with actual headstones. This one over here, let's take a quick look to see who that is. It says, in memory of Charles K. Odell, and then you can see that somebody left behind old boots for him and a few other tokens. The other thing that I found interesting or notable about this cemetery is the number of children's graves that are in here. This one, for example, son of James and Maddie Barrett, born January 31st, 1883, died January 19th, 1884. He was barely a year old when he died. And you can see this one is enclosed. The front of it, the gate's missing, in iron. See, another child's grave. This one died in August of 1882 and was again just under a year old. This little boy didn't even make it a year. Then you have the daughter, the beloved daughter of William and Anne James. Her name was Rachel. She was born December 17th of 1872. Virtually 100 years and 9 months before I was born. You can see from the dates, Rachel lived to be not quite 11 years old. These headstones are marking graves of children as well. I guess back then they had a lot of issues with rheumatic fever, and it seemed that children were especially susceptible and a lot of times didn't make it. Again, it is an interesting cemetery, especially when you think about how Frisco, being the town with the reputation that it had, being not exactly a place where you'd want to raise children, raise a family, and yet the majority of the graves that you see here happen to be children. Oh look, one of the old mining shacks. If you look up there, you can see what I believe is an old headframe. Looks like there's a road that goes up. Why don't we take a quick look-see and see what we can find. Oh look, it appears to be another old boiler down here. And then if you look at the top of this hill, you can see what looks like the remains of an old telegraph pole or telephone pole or electric pole. And then just beyond that, you have a metal cylinder, which may have been there for collecting water or holding water, or maybe for some other purpose that I'm not aware of. We're almost to that miner shack that I saw from down below. And there it is. Wow, that looks old. That is definitely from back when they were mining out here originally. Because I guess in the early 2000s, they tried to reopen the mine and start remining over here. But I don't really know what happened, what caused them to stop. Obviously the roof is caving in. I'm not going to go inside, I'm just going to point out a few things. You can see the sheet metal here, the wood and the wood beams, the stones. Looks like it was added on over the years. And then you've got this here with sheet metal on the end. And then there is this structure, which is no longer. A mysterious road going up the side of the mountain. And another mystery road going up on the left side. And then if you look just off over there, you've got another mysterious pole. That one definitely looks like some sort of electric pole that they had electricity running out here at some point. And then down over there, you can see another shack, another miner shack. It's incredible to think of the history that is here, just deteriorating, crumbling away in the desert. From this vantage point, you get quite the view. The miner shack, and then another miner shack down there, another one there, the remains of some sort of building there that's made out of stone, and then over here, the remnants of something probably related to the processing of the ore. And then you've got what looks like another one of those strange buildings where it was like dug out in the ground with the concrete walls and then just the very short roof over it. And then just beyond that is another stone building. Here, let me zoom in. Here, you can see what I'm talking about a little bit better. And then right over here is at least one of the mines where they were mining. Probably the one that caved in. Of course, there are other mines out here besides the one that caved in because they were mining all sorts of things, but mainly the silver. The silver was described, I believe, with one of the mines as being one of the greatest silver lodes ever for that time period. Looks like I've come to a crossroads of some sort. Do I A, follow the mysterious road to the left, or B, follow the mysterious road to the right? Decisions. Well, sightseers, we've got choices here to make, and you'll just have to wait and see which one I chose. I thought this was going to be another one of those wah, 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 wah moments, thinking I was going to find the headframe up here, but instead I stumbled upon this. A fairly intact old miner shack, along with an old mine right behind it. Just to be nosy, I'm gonna peek inside. Let's see if there's anything interesting to be found. Some graffiti. Here, I'll let you take a look. I got the wide view on. Make it look bigger than what it really is. There's the graffiti, 89, and then a pipe sticking down from what I can only assume was an old wood heating stove. You know, the old potbelly stoves that they used. There is another route. It's like, I've come all this way. Do I just ignore it? Or do I take another little gander and see what I can find? It's kind of like, time-wise, I should probably just forget about it. But there's a part of me that's really super nosy and wants to just go up at least to where that one boulder is and take a look. So, yeah, I think I'm going to go for it. Judging by my breathing, you can tell I'm like totally winded. And this is definitely a dead end. Another wah, 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 wah moment. All right, I'm gonna head back down and get on out of here. By the way, I think this may be an old metal ore cart. Oh my goodness. That was a hike. And I am so glad that I made it, because here's the piece de resistance. Oh, my French is very rusty, as well as the equipment out here. But this was definitely worth the hike. Take a look at this. Look at that. You have the head frame, the shack, and then that wooden piece of equipment there where they would have shaken out the ore into probably awaiting ore carts or some other means of transporting it off the mountain. Seriously, this is the type of stuff we live for, especially Marty. I just wish he would have been able to make the hike up, but lucky for him, I take good video. And oh, that is so cool. That is the thing, sightseers, that just, wow. That's Old West history right there. Now that's a head frame, sightseers. That's a head frame.
These remains serve as a stark reminder of a time when towns went quickly from boom to bust. Though Frisco is said to have been at the center of one of the most successful silver mining districts, its glory days were short-lived, having lasted only about 10 years before the collapse of the Silver Horn mine in 1885 put a halt to whatever future development may have been in store for the fast-moving Frisco. By the turn of the century, only 14 businesses remained, and by the 1920s, Utah's wildest mining town was just another ghost town.
I'm thinking, if I'm not mistaken, that this might be the remains of an old rail system. If you look, you can see the ties coming across. Just the metal is either buried or long gone. I have to say, out of all the ghost towns that we've visited over the years, aside from the ones that have been preserved and are being maintained by some historical body, this here is probably the most preserved ghost town that I've ever seen. Just out here in the Utah desert. This is high desert, by the way, because you can tell it has the pine trees and, well, I'm assuming they're pine. They could be some other type of evergreen. I think I did see some juniper trees. You can tell by the smell. Wow, now this is interesting. This is where all the action was going on, where the mining was being done. You can see in some of the cliff faces, holes being where they bored into the side of the mountain. And then right here, I believe, is where they were digging down, perhaps where that mine collapsed. You can see up over there where they were also boring into the side of the mountain. Wow, this just blows my mind that this is here. I mean, you can see where they had timbers, perhaps with a makeshift ladder leading up into that mine shaft. Well, let's move on because there was a couple other things I wanted to point out here. And then, who knows? You never know where we might end up next. These are some of the tailings that were dug out of the mines. Like Marty said, you never know what kind of toxic minerals or chemicals could be in those tailings, so I'm not gonna mess around with those. But what I wanted to point out is this building here. I had spotted it from way up above, and of course, what they say about curiosity, well, I had to go check it out for myself and share it with y'all. Well, this building here looks like, oh, I don't know what it looks like. It looks like it's fallen down. But it's possible that at some point they may have started dismantling the mining operation that was here and then just left it. So your guess is as good as mine, unless you happen to know. Unless you happen to be in the know and want to share that with us. Moving on, we've got this lovely stone building over here. You can see they really took care putting this one together. It's actually mortared in between the stones. You can see from this angle that it actually looks like two different builds. Like you've got this bottom that was built, and then this top. Looking at it from here, it doesn't appear that there's a lower story. I guess they just needed that extra foundation to ensure it wouldn't collapse. Speaking of collapse, those timbers inside don't look like they're holding up too well. Yeah, look at that roof. That's called open air dining. Or an open air concept. I think we've exhausted everything that there is to see here in Frisco. I thought maybe by coming down this road here, we'd see some more buildings, but all I'm seeing are remnants of perhaps like old mining shacks, you know, the ones that led into, you know, individual tunnels into the side of the hill or mountain. And then you've got tailings galore all down around here. Here's a huge mass pile of tailings that was left behind after they were processing the ore. All in all, quite the fascinating find. Until next time, this is Sightseeing Sally.